She stood in the doorway with two suitcases and a smile I had never seen before. Not anger, not guilt. Victory. I moved the money this morning, Linda said, adjusting the strap on her purse like she was heading to brunch instead of detonating 25 years of marriage. All of it. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. What money? She let out a soft, almost amused breath. The joint account, Mark, savings, retirement, the brokerage. I'm not stupid. The air left my lungs in a slow, disbelieving exhale. Then she delivered the line that still echoes in my head. You're nothing without me. And before I could even form a response, she stepped out, pulled the door shut, and the sound of it slamming felt like the final period at the end of a life I thought was permanent. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm 52 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, I believed I was still married. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the hollow kind, the kind that presses against your ears. We'd raised 2 kids in that house. Birthday banners had once hung in the dining room. Christmas mornings had filled the living room with torn wrapping paper and laughter. The walls held fingerprints of decades. Now they felt like witnesses. I walked slowly into the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady myself. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in the air, vanilla, and something floral. She must have sprayed it before she left. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. Zero. Not technically zero. A few $100s remained in checking, but the savings account gone. The retirement fund we'd built since our early 30s emptied. The brokerage account liquidated. Nearly $418,000 transferred out in 3 transactions. My vision blurred. We had built that money dollar by dollar. I'd worked weekends, taken side contracts, missed golf trips with friends because we needed to be smart. Linda had always handled the day-to-day bills, but I managed investments. Or at least I thought I did. Apparently I'd been managing an illusion. I sank into a kitchen chair and tried to piece together how we got here. 25 years ago, Linda wasn't the woman who just walked out that door. She was 24, bright-eyed, impatient with small towns and big dreams. I was 27, starting my own home renovation business with a borrowed truck and more determination than sense. We built everything together. When my business nearly collapsed during the 2008 recession, she stood by me. When her mother got sick, I took night shifts so she could travel back and forth to Ohio. Or at least that's how I remembered it. Somewhere along the way, things shifted. The kids left for college. The house got quieter. My company stabilized but stopped growing. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't soaring either. Steady, predictable. Maybe predictable wasn't enough. Over the last year, Linda had changed. New gym membership, new clothes. Subtle Botox she said was just preventative. She started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. When I'd asked about it, she'd laughed. Relax, Mark. Not everything is about you. I guess she was right. Because this wasn't about me. It was about him. His name was Ethan. I'd only heard it twice before today. A marketing consultant, she'd said casually. Helps small businesses modernize. 34 years old. I know that now because she told me standing in that doorway. He makes me feel alive, she said. Seen, desired. And I'd asked. She tilted her head, almost pitying. You made me feel safe. Safe. Like that was some kind of insult. I rubbed my face and forced myself to stand. Panic wouldn't help. Anger wouldn't either. I called the bank. After 23 minutes on hold, a polite woman named Denise confirmed what I already knew. Yes, Mr. Reynolds, the transfers were authorized with full credentials. There are no signs of fraud. No signs of fraud. Except the part where your wife drains your life savings and leaves you for a younger man. I hung up and stared at the family photo on the wall. We were at Yellowstone. Linda's hair blowing in the wind. My arm around her shoulders. She looked happy. Was that real? Or had I just not been looking closely enough? The humiliation hit next, not the money, the image. Friends, neighbors, the guys at church. They'd all find out. She left him for someone younger. At 52, that sentence carries weight. It whispers failure. I walked to the bedroom. Her closet was half empty. The dresser drawers cleared out with methodical precision. She hadn't stormed off in a fit of emotion. She'd planned this. On the nightstand sat the framed photo from our 25th anniversary dinner, silver balloons in the background. I remembered raising a glass and saying, to the next 25. She must have already been texting him under the table. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence wrap around me. You're nothing without me. Was I? I thought about the business I built from scratch. The employees who'd been with me for years. The clients who still called me directly because they trusted my word. I thought about the mortgage almost paid off, the truck in the driveway, the fact that I knew how to fix almost anything with my hands. Nothing. Or just not exciting. A car door slammed outside. My chest tightened. For one irrational second, I thought she'd come back, that this was a mistake, a dramatic outburst she'd regret immediately. But the engine started and the sound faded down the street. I was alone. I picked up my phone again, not sure who to call. My best friend David, my brother in Arizona. What do you even say? Hey, my wife just emptied our accounts and left me for a guy young enough to be my intern. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. Linda. Exactly 1 hour after she walked out. My heart pounded, not with hope, but something colder. Instinct. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Mark, her voice was different, breathless, shaken. There was no smirk now. There were tears. And in that moment, I knew whatever fantasy she'd walked into had just cracked. Mark, she repeated, her voice thin and trembling. Please don't hang up. I didn't speak right away. I wanted her to sit in that silence, the same silence she'd left me in an hour earlier. I'm listening, I finally said, my tone flat. She inhaled sharply like she was trying to steady herself. I just need to ask you something. Not an apology, not regret, a request. What is it, Linda? There was muffled movement on the other end, a door closing. Maybe she stepped away from him. It's about the transfer, she said. The bank called, they froze part of the funds. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, my grip tightening around the phone. Frozen why? They flagged it. Something about the receiving account. Ethan says it's just a technical issue, but her voice cracked. Can you look at it? You understand these things better than I do. There it was. The irony almost made me laugh. An hour ago, I was nothing without her. Now she needed me to explain her mistake. I thought Ethan was the expert, I said quietly. He is. I mean, he knows investments, but this is different. It's complicated. Complicated. That word used to describe our taxes, our mortgage refinancing, our retirement strategy. Now it described the man she left me for. I'll check it, I said after a long pause. Send me the transaction details. Thank you, she whispered, relief flooding her voice. I knew you'd. Don't I cut in? Don't act like this is normal. Silence stretched again. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she said softly. Like what, you transferring nearly $500,000 behind my back or telling me I'm nothing. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you said. She didn't argue. Instead, she exhaled slowly. I was angry. No, I replied, you were honest. I ended the call before she could respond. The house felt even quieter now, not empty charge. I opened my laptop at the dining room table, the same table where we'd paid bills together for decades. I logged into the accounts. The outgoing transfers were clean on our end. Authorized, verified, intentional. The receiving account, however, caught my attention. It wasn't tied to a traditional brokerage firm. It was linked to a private investment platform I'd never heard of. My stomach tightened. I Googled the company. The first page of results was a mess of forms, warnings, and vague promotional language. Promises of accelerated growth, insider-backed opportunities, crypto-backed asset expansion. In plain English, risky at best, fraudulent at worst. My phone buzzed again. A text from Linda with a PDF attached. I opened it. The documents were dense and flashy, digital signatures, projected returns testimonials that felt overly polished. I'd seen this before. Years ago, a client of mine nearly lost his retirement to something similar. It had taken months to untangle. I rubbed my temples. This wasn't a frozen transfer. This was a trap. The realization didn't bring satisfaction. It brought a heavy, complicated ache. She trusted him enough to gamble everything we built. And now she was scared. I thought about the last year. The late nights, she said, were book club. The way she'd scroll through her phone and smile faintly. The way she'd started criticizing small things about me. You never take risks anymore. You've gotten comfortable. You don't see me. Maybe she was right about one thing. I hadn't seen her pulling away. But I had felt it. I just didn't want to admit it. The front doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I froze. No one ever dropped by unannounced. I walked slowly toward the door and opened it to find David standing there holding a six-pack and wearing a concerned expression. He must have heard something in my voice earlier, or maybe my silence had said enough. "You look like hell," he said gently. "Thanks." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. We sat in the living room, beers unopened on the coffee table between us. "She left?" he asked. I nodded. "For someone else?" Another nod. He let out a low whistle. "How bad?" "She took the money." His eyebrows shot up, all of it. "Almost." David leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "That's not just emotional, Mark. That's strategic." "I know. Lawyer, I would you want to fraken on under tomorrow." He studied me carefully. "You okay?" The question hung in the air. Was I okay? My chest felt tight, my pride bruised, my future uncertain. But beneath all that, something else stirred. Clarity. "I will be," I said finally. He nodded slowly. "Good." My phone buzzed again. Linda. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Mark," she said immediately, panic sharper now. "Ethan just found out the platform is under federal review, some kind of investigation. He says it's temporary, but people online are saying it's a scam." There it was. The crack widening. "How much did you transfer into that account?" I asked. "All of it," she whispered. "And how much has cleared?" "Most of it." I closed my eyes. "Linda," I said carefully, "you may not get that money back." Silence. Then a shaky breath. No, that can't be right. You signed documents you didn't understand. You move funds without due diligence. That's exactly how these operations work." I thought her voice broke. I thought this was our chance to grow it faster, to start fresh. Start fresh. With him. And now I asked. "I don't know what to do." For a long moment, I didn't respond. I thought about the past 25 years, the sacrifices, the shared goals, the late-night budgeting sessions. I thought about her face in the doorway. "You're nothing without me." But standing there in my hallway listening to her unravel, I didn't feel like nothing. I felt steady, grounded. "I'll come take a look," I said finally. Relief flooded her voice again. "Thank you, Mark. I knew you would." I hesitated before responding. "I'm not coming for you," I said evenly. "I'm coming to assess the damage." Another silence. This one heavier. "Okay," she whispered. I ended the call and returned to the living room. David raised an eyebrow. "Trouble in paradise." I picked up my keys. Paradise just got audited. As I walked out the door, I didn't feel like a man chasing his wife. I felt like a man walking toward the truth. And whatever that truth was, it wasn't going to define me the way she thought it would. The drive across town felt longer than it should have. Linda had sent the address a high-rise apartment complex downtown, all glass and chrome, and the kind of lobby that smells faintly like eucalyptus and money. I'd driven past it 100 times and never once imagined I'd be pulling into its underground garage because my wife had moved in with another man. The security gate lifted after I gave her name. Not mine. Hers. I parked and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. Not broken, just tired. I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to compete. I was here because nearly $500,000 of my life had been wired into something that smelled like smoke. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt clinical. Stainless steel walls, soft instrumental music. My boots sounded heavy against the polished floor when I stepped out. Apartment 12B. I knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Linda stood there, barefoot, mascara faintly smudged beneath her eyes. She changed out of the outfit she wore earlier and into a loose sweater and leggings like vulnerability had a dress code. For a second, neither of us spoke. "You came," she said quietly. I said I would. She stepped aside and I walked in. The apartment was modern and impersonal, white walls, minimal furniture, oversized windows overlooking the city. It didn't smell like her. It smelled like new paint and cologne. And then I saw him. Ethan emerged from the kitchen, phone in hand. Tall, athletic build, perfectly styled hair. He wore a fitted button-down with the sleeves rolled up like he'd just stepped out of a lifestyle ad. He looked at me the way a man looks at a rival he assumed was already defeated. "Mark," he said, offering a tight smile. "Thanks for coming." I didn't take the extended hand. Show me the paperwork, I replied. His smile faltered just slightly. We sat at the dining table, if you could call it that. More like a slab of polished stone balanced on metal legs. Linda hovered between us, arms wrapped around herself. Ethan slid his laptop toward me. It's just a temporary liquidity hold, he began confidently. Regulatory review. These things happen when growth spikes quickly. I scrolled through the platform dashboard. Accounts labeled in vague terminology. Projected returns of 18% quarterly. A notification banner at the top. Account access restricted pending compliance review. How much of the transferred capital has been reinvested, I asked. About 70%, Ethan answered. The rest is pending allocation. Allocated into what? He hesitated. Diversified digital assets. I looked up at him slowly. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened. It's a managed fund structure. Linda's voice trembled. Mark, can they take it? I ignored her for a moment, still holding eye contact with him. Is this platform registered with the SEC, I asked. It operates internationally, he said carefully. That's not what I asked. Silence. There it was. The crack. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. This isn't a temporary freeze, I said evenly. It's a containment measure. Either they're under investigation or they're collapsing. Linda's face drained of color, collapsing. Ethan shifted in his seat. Let's not jump to conclusions. I'm not, I replied. I'm reading the signs. I clicked into the transaction history. Large inbound transfers from multiple accounts over the past few weeks. Rapid redeployment, no clear asset transparency. Classic liquidity funnel. How did you find this? I asked Ethan. It was recommended through a private investment group, he said defensively. Did you verify the principles? Yes. How? Another pause. Through LinkedIn profiles, probably. Maybe a webinar. I closed the laptop gently. You didn't do due diligence, I said calmly. Ethan bristled. With all due respect, I've built portfolios larger than this. Have you built them, I asked quietly, or inherited them? The tension in the room thickened. Linda stepped forward. Please, both of you, this isn't helping. She looked at me then, and for the first time since I arrived, I saw something raw in her expression. Fear. Not embarrassment. Not pride. Fear. I thought this was our chance, she said, voice cracking. Ethan said if we move fast, we could double it in a year. We could travel. Start over somewhere new. Start over. The phrase echoed again. I stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city lights. Cars moved below like distant currents. People living their lives unaware that mine had just tilted on its axis. You didn't just move fast, I said without turning around. You moved blindly. I trusted him, she whispered. And you stopped trusting me. The room fell silent. After a long moment, I turned back. There's still a chance to mitigate some of this, I said. If the funds haven't been fully dispersed, we may be able to file an emergency injunction. Ethan straightened. That's extreme. It's necessary. Linda looked between us. Can you do it? I met her eyes. Yes. Hope flickered there. But understand something, I continued. I'm not fixing this because I want you back. I'm fixing it because it's the right thing to do. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Ethan crossed his arms. We don't need a lecture. You need reality, I replied evenly. He stepped closer, subtle challenge in his posture. You think this proves something, that you're better? I studied him for a moment. No, I said quietly. It proves I'm steady. Linda's breath hitched. The difference between us wasn't youth or charm or ambition. It was foundation. Ethan thrived on acceleration. I built things that lasted. And for the first time that night, I realized something that shifted everything inside me. I wasn't here to compete for her attention. I was here because chaos needed containment. And I was good at containment. Linda moved closer to me, voice barely above a whisper. Mark, if we lose it, I don't know what we'll do. That word didn't mean what it used to. I picked up my phone. First, I said calmly, we call a securities attorney. Ethan hesitated. Linda didn't. And as I began outlining next steps, I noticed something subtle but unmistakable. The dynamic had changed. An hour ago, she'd walked out believing I was nothing without her. Now she was standing behind me, waiting for me to lead. The securities attorney answered on the second ring. His name was Daniel Harper, late 50s, sharp, direct. I'd met him once years ago through a contractor dispute, the kind of man who didn't waste syllables. Mark, he said, after I explained the situation in broad strokes, send me everything. Every document, every transfer receipt. Don't tip off the platform yet. We're looking at potential fraud, I asked. We're looking at smoke, he replied. And where there's smoke in offshore digital funds, there's usually fire. I ended the call and glanced at Linda. She was sitting on the edge of the couch now, hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. Ethan paced near the kitchen island, jaw clenched. What did he say? Linda asked. He needs the documentation. We may be able to file for an emergency freeze on outgoing distributions if funds are still within reachable channels. Ethan stopped pacing. If we do that, it could escalate things. It already escalated, I said evenly. You wired nearly $500,000 into a structure you can't fully explain. His face flushed. You don't know everything. You're right, I replied calmly. I don't. That's the problem. Linda stood abruptly. Stop, please. This isn't about ego. But it was. Not mine. His. He wasn't used to being questioned. I could see it in the way he held himself, confidence built on momentum. The kind that works when everything's rising. Not so much when things stall. I turned back to the laptop and began exporting statements. Dates, confirmation numbers, routing information. The details didn't lie. You transferred the retirement portion too? I asked quietly, not looking at her. Linda swallowed. Yes. That was long-term capital. There are penalties attached. I know, she whispered. Ethan interjected. We plan to offset it with projected gains. Projected. The word hung in the air like a cracked promise. I leaned back and looked at him fully now. Not with anger, not even with contempt. With assessment. You're not a villain, I said calmly. You're just inexperienced. His eyes flashed. I've managed high net worth clients. High risk isn't the same as high value. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Linda looked between us again, the lines in her face more visible under the overhead lights. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said softly. I studied her. This woman had shared my bed for 25 years, raised children with me, sat beside hospital beds and celebrated promotions and weathered layoffs. And yet sitting here in this sleek apartment, she felt like someone I used to know. When did you decide to leave? I asked quietly. She hesitated. A few months ago. Before or after the transfers? Her eyes dropped. After I started talking to Ethan. Honesty, at least. And you believed this would be your fresh start. She nodded faintly. With money I earned, I added, not accusing, just stating. With money we earned, she corrected gently. I let that sit. Maybe technically true. But I remembered the double shifts, the canceled vacations, the calculated risks I'd taken so we wouldn't drown. Ethan stepped forward, frustration edging into his voice. Look, this isn't helping anyone. What matters is fixing it. He wasn't wrong. But fixing it required understanding it. Daniel texted, send documents. Also check if any personal guarantees were signed. My stomach tightened. I scrolled further down the agreement. There it was. A clause allowing leverage positions tied to the primary signatory's credit. Linda, I said carefully, did you authorize margin leverage? Her brows furrowed. I don't think so. Ethan's posture stiffened. I rotated the screen toward them and pointed to the section. This allows them to extend positions using additional credit exposure. Silence. How much exposure? She whispered. Potentially more than you transferred. The room felt smaller suddenly. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. That's standard language? Not at that percentage, I replied. Linda's breathing quickened. Are we in debt? Possibly, I said, depending on how they structured it. Her composure cracked. She sank back onto the couch, hands covering her face. I just wanted to feel alive again, she murmured through her fingers. I didn't want to feel invisible. The confession hit harder than I expected. Invisible. I had been so focused on providing stabilizing building, maybe I hadn't seen her fading in ways I didn't understand. But invisibility doesn't justify implosion. Ethan crouched beside her, placing a hand on her knee. We'll fix this, he said softly. She didn't lean into him. She looked at me instead. What do we do? Not what do we do? What do you do? I felt it then, the shift fully settling. I wasn't the man left behind. I was the man they both needed. First, I said evenly, we prepare for the worst-case scenario. Ethan exhaled sharply. That's defeatist. It's responsible. I gathered my things and stood. I'll coordinate with Daniel tonight. You'll need to provide full transparency, no omissions. Ethan met my gaze, pride battling practicality. Fine, he said. I paused near the door. Linda stood as well. Mark, she said quietly, thank you. I looked at her for a long moment. I'm not doing this for gratitude, I replied. I'm doing it because chaos spreads if no one contains it. Her eyes glistened. Do you hate me? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I considered it. No, I said honestly, I don't hate you. That almost seemed to hurt her more. I just see you clearly now. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. Upstairs I'd felt displaced. Now I felt anchored. Not because she needed me, but because I didn't need her the way I once thought I did. When I stepped into the cool night air, I inhaled deeply. The city hummed around me, steady, indifferent, alive. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the bank. Additional review flagged on leveraged exposure. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about lost money anymore. This was about unraveling consequences. And as I walked to my truck, I understood something with quiet certainty. Youth might chase acceleration, but experience knows how to survive impact. By the time I got home, it was close to midnight. The house greeted me with that same hollow quiet, but it no longer felt like it was swallowing me. It felt like space to think, to move, to decide. I loosened my collar, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table where Linda and I had mapped out our future so many times before. Only now the future wasn't shared. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. Send everything, he asked without preamble. Just did. I've seen the structure before, he said. It's layered. Funds move through multiple shells before settling. That makes recovery harder. How hard? A pause. Depends on how fast we move and how cooperative the co-investor is. Co-investor? Ethan. He'll cooperate, I said. You sure? No, I admitted, but he doesn't have much choice. Daniel exhaled slowly. There's another issue. My stomach tightened. The margin clause you mentioned. If leverage positions were executed and markets turned, liability could extend beyond the initial capital. How far beyond? Potentially significant. I closed my eyes briefly. So this could wipe out more than the account. Yes. After we hung up, I sat there in the dim kitchen light, staring at the grain of the wood table. Linda hadn't just gambled what we built. She might have signed us into debt. The thought didn't ignite anger the way I expected. It ignited clarity. I wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. I was containing fallout. The next morning, I returned to the high-rise. Linda opened the door before I knocked. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back, face bare, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. The glamour from yesterday was gone. Ethan's in the bedroom, she said quietly, on calls. Good, I replied. He needs to be. We sat across from each other at the stone table again, but something had shifted in the air. Fragility. Mark, she began, voice trembling slightly. I need you to know something. I waited. I didn't leave because you weren't enough. The irony almost made me smile. You said I was nothing. I was trying to convince myself, she whispered. Of what? That I wasn't throwing away something real. The honesty stung, but not the way she expected. You already had, I said calmly. She swallowed hard. Ethan entered the room, phone still in hand. His confidence from yesterday had thinned noticeably. I spoke with the platform rep, he said. They claim it's just regulatory compliance. Did you request written confirmation, I asked. They'll send something. That's not good enough. He rubbed his jaw. What do you suggest? I opened my folder and laid out printed documents. I suggest full disclosure, I said, because Daniel found something. Linda's hands trembled slightly. What? The margin leverage wasn't passive, it was activated. Silence. Ethan's expression shifted. That's not possible, he said quickly. It is, I replied, sliding the page toward him. You authorized it. His eyes scanned the document. Linda leaned forward. Ethan. He hesitated just long enough. It was a calculated move, he said finally. Market momentum was strong. It increased our upside. I asked quietly. He ignored that. Linda's voice sharpened. You said it was conservative. It was controlled risk. Controlled, I asked. You leveraged retirement capital. His jaw tightened. High returns require conviction. And accountability, I replied. Linda stood abruptly. You didn't tell me, she said, staring at him. You said we were protecting the principal. We are, he insisted. This is temporary. But doubt had crept into his voice. Linda turned to me, eyes glossy. Are we exposed beyond what I transferred? Yes, I said gently. Her shoulders sagged like something inside her had finally given way. Ethan stepped toward her. Don't panic. We just need to wait it out. Waiting, I said evenly, is how people lose everything. He turned on me. You don't get to lecture me in my own home. I held his gaze without flinching. This isn't about territory. Linda's breathing grew shallow. How much, she whispered. I didn't sugarcoat it. If markets dip and leverage triggers, liquidation exposure could exceed 6 figures. The room felt suddenly too small. Ethan ran both hands through his hair. That's worst case. It's realistic case, I replied. Linda looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the confident man who made her feel alive, but a man who gambled with money that wasn't fully his. You told me we were safe, she said, voice cracking. We are, he insisted. You're overreacting. Overreacting. The word hung heavy. For years, Linda had accused me of playing it too safe. Now she was clinging to safety like a life raft. I stood slowly. I'll proceed with the injunction, I said. We'll try to freeze further leverage. Ethan scoffed. That could tank everything. Everything is already tanking, I replied calmly. Linda looked at me, not with defiance this time, not even desperation, with realization. You always thought 3 steps ahead, she said softly. I didn't answer. Because that wasn't a compliment. It was a comparison. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. You're making this worse, he muttered. No, I said evenly. Reality is making this worse. Linda sank back into her chair. Mark, she said, voice barely audible. I made a mistake. The words landed differently this time. Not defensive. Not prideful. Broken. I met her eyes. Yes, I said gently. You did. Tears spilled over, silent and steady. Ethan stood rigid, caught between ego and exposure. And in that moment, the illusion shattered completely. She hadn't left me for strength. She'd left me for excitement. But excitement doesn't steady a collapsing floor. As I gathered my papers, Linda reached out instinctively like she used to when she was overwhelmed. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. Don't go, she whispered. I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. I'm not going anywhere, I said calmly. But I'm not staying either. Her hand fell slowly back to her lap. Because now she understood. I wasn't competing. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't chasing. I was simply standing. And sometimes that's the most powerful position of all. The injunction was filed by noon. Daniel moved fast, faster than I'd ever seen him move. By mid-afternoon, he'd secured a temporary legal hold on further leveraged activity tied to Linda's account, at least within domestic jurisdiction. It wasn't a guarantee of recovery, but it was a firewall. A containment line. When I returned to the apartment that evening, the energy had shifted again. This time it wasn't tension. It was fracture. The door opened and Linda stood there alone. Where's Ethan? I asked. She stepped aside wordlessly. 2 suitcases sat near the wall. Not hers. He left, she said. Left the apartment. Left. Her voice was hollow. He said he needed space to manage optics with his other clients. I absorbed that quietly. And the exposure, she asked. We stopped the bleeding, I said. But some capital is likely gone. We'll know more once the compliance review unfolds. She nodded slowly as if every word cost her something. The sleek apartment no longer looked aspirational. It looked temporary, staged, empty. Did he know, she asked suddenly. About the leverage, I replied. She nodded. Yes. She closed her eyes. I defended him, she whispered. I told you were overreacting. I didn't remind her that she'd once said I was nothing. There was no need. She was standing in the aftermath of that sentence. We sat across from each other, no laptop between us this time. No documents, no posturing. Just truth. I thought I was suffocating, she said after a long silence. I thought our life had turned into a slow fade. The same routines, the same conversations. I felt invisible in my own house. I listened. Not as her husband, as a witness. You were steady, she continued. Predictable, safe, and I convinced myself that safe meant stagnant. I let out a quiet breath. Safe meant stable, I said. She nodded faintly. I know that now. The city lights flickered beyond the window, indifferent as ever. Why didn't you tell me, I asked gently, that I was unhappy? She gave a sad half smile. Because I didn't fully understand it myself. And because I didn't want to admit that maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was me. I leaned back in my chair. We both changed, I said. That's what time does. But you didn't run, she replied. No, I built. Even when it was boring, even when it felt repetitive. Because repetition builds equity. Excitement burns it. She looked smaller somehow, sitting there in that oversized apartment. Mark, she said carefully, if we recover some of the money, if this doesn't destroy everything, would you ever consider number? The word came out calm, not sharp, not angry. Final. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't argue. I don't say that to punish you, I continued. I say it because something fundamental broke. I know, she whispered. You didn't just leave, you dismantled trust, financially, emotionally, deliberately. She flinched at that last word. You planned it. I did, she admitted. And I won't live in a marriage where I have to wonder if my partner sees me as disposable. The silence stretched heavy but honest. I was scared of getting older, she said finally, of feeling unwanted. Ethan made me feel seen, desired, like I still had spark. You do have spark, I said evenly, but spark without foundation burns out. A tear slid down her cheek. I thought I was brave, she murmured, choosing something risky, choosing myself. And now, ich war suim, I think I was running. There it was. Not defiance, not pride, just recognition. The cost of pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet loss. She looked around the apartment as if seeing it clearly for the first time. This doesn't even feel like home, she said softly. It isn't, I replied. Home isn't marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. Home is accumulated memory. She drew in a slow breath. I'm going to have to start over. Yes, I said. The word didn't carry cruelty. It carried reality. And you, she asked. I already have. That seemed to surprise her. How went for it? I'm not rebuilding a marriage, I said. I'm rebuilding myself. I stood and walked toward the window, hands in my pockets. For years, I defined myself as husband, provider, stabilizer. I wrapped my identity around us. I turned back to face her. When you left, it felt like erasure. She lowered her gaze. But it wasn't, I continued. It was exposure. It showed me what remains when someone walks out. And what remains, she asked softly. Me. Just me. Not diminished. Not nothing. She stood slowly, walking closer. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, but I hope one day you'll remember us without bitterness. I considered that. I don't feel bitter, I replied honestly. I feel awake. That seemed to hit her harder than anger ever could. Will you be okay? She asked quietly. Yes. She nodded as if accepting a verdict. As I moved toward the door, she spoke one last time. I was wrong about you. I paused. In what way? You're not nothing without me. I gave her a small, measured nod. And you're not invisible without youth, I said gently. Her lips trembled. I stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind me this time. Not a slam. Just an ending. As I walked toward the elevator, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. Sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision not to return to something that no longer holds integrity. The elevator descended steadily. Just like I had. Grounded. 3 months later, I signed the final separation papers at the same wooden desk where I'd once signed our mortgage refinance. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Daniel had managed to recover a portion of the funds, just under 60%. The rest had dissolved into legal gray zones and international shell accounts. The leveraged exposure had been contained before it spiraled, but the hit was real. Financially, it hurt. Emotionally, it clarified. I sold the house 2 weeks after the paperwork cleared. Not because I couldn't afford it, because I didn't need a museum of memories. Packing up 25 years of life is a strange experience. You find things you forgot, mattered ticket stubs, handwritten notes, old birthday cards with inside jokes that don't make sense anymore. I kept a few photos. Not all of them. Just enough to honor what was real without clinging to what wasn't. The new place is smaller. a townhouse on the edge of the city with a modest backyard and a garage I converted into a workspace. I expanded my renovation business into custom design consulting. Leaner, more strategic. Less overhead, more intention. Turns out when you're not funding someone else's escape plan, you have capital to reinvest in yourself. The first night I slept there, the quiet didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. Linda called once during those months. Not crying. Not panicked. Steady. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. For what? For not destroying me when you could have. I thought about that. There had been moments, especially in those early days, when revenge would have been easy. Public humiliation, legal aggression, narrative control. But destruction spreads, it doesn't contain. I wasn't interested in winning, I said. I was interested in surviving. She was quiet for a moment. I've been seeing a therapist, she added, trying to understand why I needed external validation so badly. That's good, I replied. I'm working part-time now, smaller apartment, it's humbling. Humbling. Yes. Pride inflates quickly. Reality corrects it. I hope you're finding your footing, I said honestly. I am, she replied slowly. There was a pause. I don't regret loving you, she said softly. I let that sit. Neither do I answered. Because it was true. Loving someone isn't a mistake. Ignoring fractures is. After we hung up, I stood on my back patio, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass in early fall. Crisp, honest. I started dating again, nothing dramatic. Coffee with a woman named Karen who teaches middle school art. A dinner with someone I met through a mutual client. No urgency, no need to prove anything. At 52, you don't date to conquer. You date to connect. And the surprising thing, I wasn't chasing spark. I was looking for steadiness. The irony made me smile. One evening, David stopped by with takeout and 2 beers. We sat in folding chairs in the garage workspace, sawdust still clinging to the floor from a project I'd been finishing. You look different, he said, studying me. How will, lighter. I nodded slowly. Losing her felt like losing oxygen at first, I admitted. But then I realized something. What's that? Wetamanimon. I wasn't suffocating because she left. He raised an eyebrow. I was suffocating because I'd stopped seeing myself outside of the marriage. He leaned back in his chair. That's deep for a contractor, he joked. I chuckled. But it was true. When Linda said I was nothing without her, she was projecting her own fear. She needed to believe I'd collapse. Because if I didn't, then leaving wasn't liberation. It was abandonment. An hour after she slammed that door, she called me crying. At the time, I thought it was about money. It wasn't. It was about foundation. She stepped off something stable, expecting flight. Instead, she found gravity. And here's the part no one tells you when you're a middle-aged man staring at an empty house. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to redefine yourself beyond who you've been to someone else. You're allowed to build again. The difference is this time you build with awareness. I don't hate Linda. I don't resent Ethan. They were catalysts, painful ones, but necessary. Because losing what I thought defined me forced me to confront who I am without it. And who I am is not nothing. I am capable. I am steady. I am resilient. And if you're listening to this right now, if you've been told you're too old, too boring, too safe, too replaceable, hear me clearly. Stability is not weakness. Integrity is not outdated. And starting over at 52 isn't failure. It's refinement. So wherever you're listening from tonight, your car, your kitchen, maybe a quiet house that feels heavier than it used to, I want you to know something. You are more than who walked away from you. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone underestimated you? We share stories like this every day, stories about resilience, growth, and finding yourself when everything falls apart. So subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep walking this road together. Because sometimes the door that slams is the one that finally opens you.